Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. It is a Thursday show as we continue to talk about the possible free agent options and trade options. We're obviously aware that's Trey Hendrickson on the cover there, and he is not a free agent. He is a player under contract. But regardless, we're going to look at all the free agent options and the trade options at edge rusher today for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We started on Monday with the safeties, then went corners, inside linebackers, and today it is all about the edge rushers. So we'll take a look at who's currently on the team for the Bucs, who they might re-sign, and who are some new players they may go after in free agency in March. So a lot to get to on today's show. And of course, we'll answer super chats, a couple comments, all of that good stuff. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is my Thursday co-host of the Pewter Report podcast, Adam Slavon. Adam, what's up, man? How we doing?
Matt, we're doing great. Great to be on with you this afternoon and go over what is probably the most important position in addressing the defense, being the edge rusher. And there's so many options on the market with the news that Joey Bosa is on the market now, potentially being cut by the Chargers. Preston Smith was released a couple days ago. And then the guys that we've mentioned for weeks now, Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. Do they trade for one of them? There's guys on the free agent market already in Josh Sweat, Khalil Mack, like just so many options. I know we've discussed inside linebacker, corner this week on separate Pewter Report podcast, but really excited to talk about the edge rushers today.
It's funny, right? Because so much prep work by every NFL front office has to be done with the NFL draft, and the combine's next week. We're going to be in Indianapolis for it. Then there's like individual meetings. They bring players out to certain cities, guys that they want to meet with. But it's almost a little backwards, right? It's like there's all this attention on the draft, and it's like, oh, by the way, we have to sign free agents. And obviously multitasking, and that's why you build out a whole staff and a front office, because you have other people doing different things. But it is funny. It's like talking about free agency now. Then we're going to not forget free agency, but then put all this focus on the combine next week when all of these prospects and Todd Bowles and Jason Light are in Indianapolis, who we'll talk to. And then right away, we're back to free agency, and it completely alters some of the draft plans that the Bucs may have. So edge rusher, to me, is a very fascinating one. Every single position of need that the Bucs have on defense, to me, is very interesting. But this one I find interesting because I was making the point yesterday with the linebackers that that's probably going to be a little bit more of the bargain hunting type of thing, just based on
like
who's
positional
available.
Value.
Yeah, positional value as well. But the edge rusher very much feels like it's going to be all about, let's get a big fish. Let's get an absolute game changer. And the Bucs have been able to do that before via the trade or via free agency signing. A little bit different back when it was JPP and Shaq. I think this time it's going to be pretty much an NFL household name. Again, not that all of America is going to know, but if you're a big NFL fan, you're going to know this person. So I'm excited for that aspect of this position. I think they're going to get an alpha type of player that can lead this outside linebacker room.
I agree. And if you look at free agency and use the analogy of like Jason Light sitting by the pool, like in the past couple of years, he might dip his toe in the water a little bit, get a value signing here and there. But this year he needs to make a splash and get that true, like you mentioned, alpha dog edge rusher, somebody that can learn, like kind of teach Yaya Diaby and some of the outside linebackers in the room, like a veteran guy who's been there in the league for a while, understands his responsibilities, because I don't know how much coaching they're going to get. So getting that from like a Khalil Mack, like a Preston Smith or Joey Bosa, somebody, regardless of who it is, I think will be beneficial. And then again, just getting that edge rusher to really add to the pass rush, because you look at the Eagles and what they did in the Super Bowl. How were they so dominant?
Right.
Their pass rush, and it only took 4 of them. And I think the Bucs, they're 3/4 of the way there. They have Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, and Yaya. I think that's a solid 3, but you need that other guy. And I think that's going to be their primary offseason focus.
It has to be. No doubt about it. It's got to be one of the top things that they do this offseason. And you mentioned Yaya Diaby a moment ago. Before we look at kind of the available free agents for the Buccaneers, we got to talk about what they already have in house. And Yaya is certainly one of them. And really, with the exception of Yaya and Chris Braswell, this could be an entirely different edge rusher room besides Yaya, who we know is penciled in as a starter pretty much at this point, and Chris Braswell, who was a second-round pick last season, and you're not going to give up on a second-round pick after after 1 year.
Right.
But besides that, the linebacker room might be the most revamped room, but the outside linebackers won't be that far off either.
Yeah, again, I agree with you. And you look at it, and Anthony Nelson, Shaq Barrett, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, they're all going to be free agents, and those aren't the most inspiring free agents. I know you wrote about Anthony Nelson today, and you make a great argument for him about re-signing him, just being that fourth or fifth outside linebacker. But the rest of the room, I mean, there's the potential that not only could the Bucs have one or two inside linebackers coming into the mix, but one or two outside linebackers as well, and not just mentioning getting a top guy, but also somebody that can slide in after Diaby is maybe the third best pass rusher. And I don't think that's Tryon-Shoyinka at this point. I feel like the potential, it just kind of, it's not there anymore like it was a couple seasons ago. And so you look at it, you look at the market, and you're like, they could get a big fish and then also maybe a small fish too.
Yeah, I would like to see the Bucs go after a proven commodity at edge rusher, but then also maybe draft one, and maybe that's in the first round, maybe that's in the fourth round. I don't know. Who's to say, really? When it comes to the rest of the room, though, like I haven't even given Joe Tryon-Shoyinka another second of thought, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful. It's just the ship has sailed with JTS. At this point, I don't even think like bringing him back on a veteran's minimum does anything for the team. Now, Anthony Nelson, who I did write about today, you can check it out on pewterreport.com. To me, Anthony Nelson is a different type of situation because for his career with the Buccaneers, he has played pretty much the same role. He's been a guy, and there's a reason why Todd Bowles calls him Steady Eddie, but he's been the player that you can plug and play. You can put him in a pinch, and he will be absolutely fine. He's not a 15 sack guy per season. He doesn't even get those type of opportunities. But, he was drafted in 2019, played a little bit in 2020, won the Super Bowl with the Bucs, recorded a tackle in that game. But it was really the past 3 or 4 seasons, and they signed him to a 2-year deal the last time he hit free agency. It's been the last 3 to 4 seasons where he has really shown his value to the Buccaneers. I mean, I believe it was 2022. He led the Bucs outside linebackers with 5.5 sacks. He's had 2 seasons where he's reached at least 5 sacks, one where he had 3, and last season he had 4. So even in limited production, he started 18 career games. He's played in 92, but in 18 starts in his career, not that he got a sack every single time he started, but he has 18.5 career sacks. So that averages out to 1 sack a game when he does start. But here's the thing. I am not advocating for Anthony Nelson to be the starter of this team. I think it's a good idea to have Anthony Nelson back because he is a great 4th string, 5th string type of guy on this team. I'm fine if Anthony Nelson has to start 2 or 3 games just because of the nature of the NFL with, tons of sacks and things of that nature. But I don't want him starting 17 games. That's where he kind of gets exposed. The forced fumble of Chuba Hubbard in that overtime game.
Won the game.
Won the game. It was such an important moment for Tampa Bay to come back and win it in overtime. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka never made a play like that. Chris Braswell hasn't had a moment. And sure, it was only 1 year for Braswell. He could improve. But I mean, again, it's tough to look at his production again. 5 sacks in 2021, 5.5 in 2022, 3 in 2023, and 4 in 2024. It's not TJ Watt numbers, no doubt about it. But for a fourth and fifth string guy, I have no issue with that at all. It's probably only going to cost the Bucs like maybe $4 million, something like that, unless some other team has interest in Anthony Nelson. But I don't totally see it. And until you kind of figure out who's your top option at outside linebacker, who's even your third option, because the problem is we can sit here and say, oh, Chris Braswell, he may improve. Even if Braswell does improve, okay, Jose Ramirez, he can't even crack the lineup. He dresses, what, twice a season? And Marquise Watts, I get it. He was injured and he missed a lot of time and went on season-ending IR and never came off of it, even though for weeks we were like, when's he coming back? When's he coming back? And there was no report. Marquise Watts has made the best career out of like one moment against the Tennessee Titans in a blowout game. And after that, myself included, was like, get this guy more snaps, get him more opportunities. And the Bucs just refuse to. So if the Bucs are refusing to give Marquise Watts an opportunity, and I know the injury has played a big factor, well, then I'm ready to move on from both of them. If they want to be perimeter practice squad guys, that's fine by me. Absolutely. But I want a situation this year for the Bucs where you have Yaya Diaby starting on one side. You have a proven commodity, a veteran, whether it's some of the guys we'll talk about today, whether it's Trey Hendrickson, Khalil Mack, the list goes on and on and on. Starting on the other side. Then you have Chris Braswell waiting in the wings. We'll see what type of improvement he has because it's no guarantee. I hope he has a great second season. I hope he has the second year type of improvement that we saw on the other side with the offensive line with the likes of Cody Mauch in year 2 and Luke Gedeke in year 2. Because Braswell at this point, I'm not penciling him in to really do anything. So you have him around. He could fluctuate anywhere from third string to fifth string. And then you also draft another edge rusher this year. Could it be first round? Sure. Maybe it's a third rounder based on, what happens in free agency. And you have that new draft pick compete with Chris Braswell and Anthony Nelson to fill out that outside linebacker room. And overall, I think that's really good depth, depending on what happens with Braswell. But that's a pretty good spot to be in.
Yeah, I love your outline there. And just to add to a couple of your points that you made, so you talk about Anthony Nelson, and I think with him, he really elevates the floor of the room. You mentioned you can count on him for 3 to 5 sacks a year. And when he plays and spot starts, he finds a way to make plays. He's not the flashiest guy, but he also contributes in run defense because of his height and his size. I think it's really unique to Todd Bowles' scheme and defense to where I don't think he's going to go anywhere else. I think if the Bucs, they have interest in him on a 1-year deal, they're going to keep signing him to 1 or 2-year deals until probably his early 30s. And so you look at that, you have, you mentioned Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts. Again, don't see them really. They had an opportunity this past year with outside linebacker room kind of floundering, and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka too. And none of those guys stepped up when they really could have. And with Chris Braswell, you mentioned you can't really count on him, but at the same time, being a second-round pick, like you don't want to give up on him. So I think the ideal scenario would be to have, you mentioned the proven commodity, probably playing 70 to 80% of the snaps. You have Nelson you can pencil in to kind of eat up some of the remaining snaps, and then Braswell. I think if you have those 4 and then sign Jose Ramirez, Marquise Watts, practice squad level deals, bring Shaq back, maybe in training camp, see if he has a little juice as a third down guy. I think right there, you're kind of laying the foundation. I kind of want to ask you, Matt, when you look at this room, in this position room, what would be the ideal scenario for you? Would it be to get that proven commodity and then draft a guy in round 3? Would it be just to get to draft somebody in round 1 if it's Mike Green or Donovan Ezeraku? If you were Jason Light and you were in his shoes and you're like, hey, I got to improve this outside linebacker room, how would you go about it?
So there's a couple of different factors involved, because if the Bucs want to go with a dude like Khalil Mack, it's definitely the best idea for the Bucs to also draft an edge rusher, because Khalil Mack is not a long-term option for Tampa Bay. It's a short-term fix, no doubt about it, but I don't see him playing more than really 2 seasons for Tampa
Yeah.
Bay. And even that, to me, would be a stretch. I think since he's already kind of contemplated retirement, that he's probably done after one more season. Especially now, if the Bucs were to get Khalil Mack and they win a Super Bowl, then it's like, all right, cool. Like, everybody got what they wanted. You know, the Bucs won a Super Bowl. Khalil Mack got the first Super Bowl of his career. He is good to go. But the Bucs obviously have to still play next season and find another starter. So if it's a situation like Khalil Mack, I think you have to look at an edge rusher in an earlier round. Like, it doesn't have to be a first round, but certainly by the end of the third round, you have to find an edge rusher. And at the end of the day, like, you know, Yaya Diaby was a third rounder. If they find another Yaya Diaby, not like the same skill set, but the same like production from Yaya, and you have two pretty solid number 2 outside linebackers, I think the Bucs can still kind of get away with that. Now, if the Bucs end up making a trade, I know we've talked about Myles Garrett on the show, not looking very likely just given his contract situation, and that's more of a Browns thing than it necessarily is a Bucs thing. But someone we have talked about a ton on this show is Trey Hendrickson. And if you're going to trade for Trey Hendrickson, then, in my opinion, you always want to replenish the position. But in my opinion, you don't necessarily have to draft an edge rusher that early, because you're going to have a guy that's going to be here for at least like 4 seasons, depending on what type of and kind of new contract you're going to give him, because he is looking for an extension, which I think the Bucs would be happy to do since he's only going to be 30 versus I think Khalil Mack's like 34 already.
In 2 days,
if you
he's
get
34.
like a Trey Hendrickson, that would lead me to believe that you don't have to go with an early prospect. But I wouldn't go just a prospect and bam, your issues are fixed, because as we've seen, the Bucs have had issues drafting edge rushers. They've done a good job finding edge rushers in other ways with free agency and trading, but drafting them has not gone too well in the past couple of years.
And I think that last point you made there speaks to why, like, the Bucs should go out and try to attempt to acquire a Trey Hendrickson or a Khalil Mack or a Josh Sweat, because that route of going outside and not relying on drafting somebody. I mean, it worked for Yaya, but the other track record, it was just kind of some misses through the draft. And Trey Hendrickson, 35 sacks the past 2 seasons. You would take that if it meant trading back, giving up your first round pick, getting 2 second rounders, or trading your second round pick and a 5th rounder this year to get that high level player, like in a weaker draft class by most analysts. I mean, you would take that all day. And you mentioned he's only 30. He's a Florida native. I think that has some appeal as well, not just with Hendrickson, also Khalil Mack. He's from Florida. And just kind of getting those kind of guys, I think there is a level of fit there. But Hendrickson, man, the most sacks in the league the past 2 years. He had 36 quarterback hits last season, and equates to about 2 a game. You look at Tampa Bay's pass rush, there were games where they barely got 2 quarterback hits from all the guys combined. So just getting a guy that can consistently get after the quarterback not only elevates the pass rush, but all the other guys around him too. And one other point I want to make there is with Josh Sweat. And so Josh Sweat, he's probably the top free agent edge rusher out there. He's 28 years old in March, but his sack totals are a little misleading because he played on such an elite Eagles defense to where if he came to a team like Tampa Bay, his sack totals probably go up a little bit too.
And that's always the risk with any free agent. We saw it with Bryce Huff last year. I think Zach Bond, even though he's a different position, is another interesting example because he played a different position with the Saints, signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the Eagles, and obviously was fantastic. He was an all-pro. By the way, Tampa Bay Tie Guy says, please tell me we are going to sign Josh Sweat or trade for Trey Hendrickson. But for Sweat and with Zach Bond, like he got that 1-year deal. Was he a product of his environment? And because we see some guys work great in certain systems, but then they go somewhere else and it just doesn't pan out. I think a great example, and I used this on yesterday's show as well, different bit of a situation because it's a quarterback, but a lot of people, and you probably remember this, when Matt Flynn had that last start of the season after, I guess the Packers had clinched a bye, or they clinched like their playoff spot, and he balled out against the Detroit Lions and got a boatload of money from the
3 years, $24 million. Yeah.
Based on one start.
Yep.
Based on one start. And then Seattle ended up being fine because they drafted Russell Wilson in a later round. But it's the example of like cashing out a big moment. All the credit in the world to Matt Flynn, all the credit in the world to Josh Sweat, wherever he goes as free agency, and same with Zach Bond and other guys that have won a championship and then get the money after. But with Bond and Sweat, we're going to find out, and there's no way to know until they're in a new system, how are they going to look in a new defense that may ask them to do different things, especially Josh Sweat coming to Tampa Bay. How often did he drop back in coverage with the Eagles? You know, the Eagles didn't blitz at all, really, in that Super Bowl game specifically. We know, for better or for worse, how much Todd Bowles loves to use the versatility of his outside linebackers, drop them back in coverage. That's something Josh Sweat even wants to do. Now, with Hendrickson, he already went from one spot to another and was able to, you know, ball out and do his thing. There are some guys that it doesn't matter where they go. If you just say, hey, get after the quarterback, they go, okay, all right, I'll go and do it. And that's not taking anything away from Josh Sweat. I just don't think he's in that category just yet. The best thing that the Bucs have going on, and other people will have going on with Trey Hendrickson, is that he gets so overlooked. And I saw people in the comments the other day, like on a YouTube episode, after the episode was done, like in our YouTube comments, being like, oh yeah, like no one's ever heard of Trey Hendrickson, and like mocking it. I'm not saying no one's ever heard of Trey Hendrickson, but in his own division, it's Myles Garrett, TJ Watt. They get all of the attention, and Trey Hendrickson gets nothing. Myles Garrett is on the Cleveland Browns. The best they've ever done was get to the second round of the playoffs, and that was with Baker Mayfield. I know they went like 2 seasons ago, but they lost to the Houston Texans. TJ Watt, I get it. It's the Steelers. It's a huge franchise. They've been around forever. Trey Hendrickson went to a Super Bowl in his first year with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I get it. They haven't made the playoffs over the last 2 years. But this dude is getting 17 sacks in the last 2 seasons. Like, what is everybody else missing? Like, I get it. Myles Garrett is the best edge rusher in the league. If you want to argue someone else, fine. But no one brings up Trey Hendrickson the way that they do some of these other big guys. And you know what? Maybe that's better for the Bucs, because the more everybody talks about the Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and how are they going to find out how to pay these guys, that's just even better and better for the Buccaneers. Now, would you give up that draft capital for Trey Hendrickson, or would you take the risk of paying the money for Josh Sweat? What if you're deciding between those two? What's your response?
I would say Hendrickson. I would lean towards him, because you look at the fact that he's overlooked, right? So the cost of draft capital will be less than Myles Garrett, less than Max Crosby, but you're getting similar production. He's overlooked in his own division, overlooked on his own team. And when he started his career with the Saints, he didn't play until his last season. So even though he's 30 years old, he doesn't have a 30-year-old wear and tear on his body. And so I think with Hendrickson, he's still going to be able to produce the numbers that he is the past couple of seasons for another couple of seasons. And I think with that, you know what you're going to get. He is the more proven commodity. So if we're basing it solely on that, I think you lean Hendrickson. But with Josh Sweat, he does have some appeal, because there is an element of he still might have another level in him. He's shown throughout his career that he's durable. He's only missed 2 games, I think, since 2018. So you know he's going to be on the field. And you know he's a good player. In a different environment, could he become a great player? And that's something that Todd Bowles will really have to assess, on whether how much he'll fit into the team, and asking him to drop in coverage. Same argument with Hendrickson, who would be the best fit. But I think in terms of just getting after the quarterback, you'd rather have Trey Hendrickson there.
Now, there is one other trade option for the Bucs, and it's with a familiar person that used to work in their organization, and that's with John Spytek and the Raiders and Max Crosby. I don't know exactly what the starting price is going to be for Max Crosby. Durability has been a little bit of an issue. And then I'm also seeing very different things with Max Crosby in terms of in one article, in one outlet, it's I love being with the Raiders. I want to ball out. I have a tattoo of them. I don't know if he has a tattoo of them. He might, though. He's got a lot of tattoos.
Yeah, he does.
I'm here for the long haul. And then in the next article, the next clip I see, it's like, I don't want to restart. I want to win, and I want to play for a contender. So I don't know what to believe if Max Crosby is even, available or wants to be available to play for a contending team. Then Scott has brought up this point as well, and I do agree with it, that John Spytek just became the general manager. Pete Carroll's the head coach now. Obviously, he's a fun-loving dude. People like him.
Yep.
And naturally, people are really going to be a fan of Pete Carroll. And it doesn't always have to be this way, but sometimes you get into like a good cop, bad cop situation with a head coach and GM, depending on who you think is the good cop and who you think is the bad cop. But with Pete Carroll being this laid-back, kind of zany dude, still coaching, oldest coach in the league, does John Spytek want to make his first reputation with the Raiders and their fans, which, again, is another, like, big-time fan base, the way that the Steelers are? Do you want your first big move as Raiders general manager to be trading Max Crosby, kind of like one of your few franchise players at the moment? I guess you can kind of combat that with if they end up getting one of these two quarterbacks that everybody's talking about, with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. But that's a little bit of a tough first move. I get it. You got to do what's best for business, but there's also a little bit of a PR side that plays into it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you look at it, and it's like, you don't want your first move to be trading the best player on the team, even in a roster that has so many holes. I mean, you kind of saw it last year when the Bucs played the Raiders. The Bucs were able to just control the game by not doing too much because the Raiders don't have that game-changing talent. But on the flip side, when John Gruden went over to the Raiders a few years back, some of the first moves that they made was trading Khalil Mack, trading Amari Cooper. And I think the argument is if John Spytek was hired to build the team through the draft, wouldn't you want to acquire more draft capital? If he's been one of the best assistant GMs in the league and assessing talent every single year. I mean, you look at the Bucs track record of homegrown talent. If you want to build something like that in Las Vegas, I think trading Max Crosby is the right move because even though you got Pete Carroll, I think Pete Carroll is more of kind of a culture hire, if anything, to get the team back on the right track after so many head coaches just kind of flamed out, not the right situations. He helps them get back on the right track, maybe a bridge quarterback, and then, hey, trade Max Crosby, see what you can get, and then do a full rebuild.
They want Pete Carroll to do for the Raiders what Bruce Arians did for the Bucs, which at first was provide stability, establish that culture. Now, obviously, winning a Super Bowl, the Raiders want to do that too. Bruce Arians was able to with the help of Tom Brady and company. But you have to instill that culture, which is still there, even though Bruce Arians is no longer coaching the team. It's still there because of Bruce, because of Tom Brady. They have it with this current team as well, even though players come and go. So it'll be very interesting to see. And the Gruden thing is interesting too, because towards the end, they started winning. Like they came close to the postseason. They were winning games, and then everything happened, and rightfully so. The Raiders moved on from John Gruden. Good to see Gruden getting the second act now.
If it didn't happen, though, I think the Raiders become a playoff level team.
Right. And I'm not saying they stopped the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty, but they were heading in the right direction. And then everything fell apart with the lawsuit and John Gruden and letting him go. And we don't have to go down that road. Obviously, it's all went on. It's all public at this point. So interesting to see if Max Crosby would end up getting traded and would he go to the Bucs, given the Bucs' history with John Spytek. I want to talk about another well-known name that is going to become available momentarily. But another thing that's pretty well-known is Celsius Energy Drinks, which, of course, is the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Check out all the fantastic flavors that Celsius has, from the Arctic vibe, the Playa vibe, which is a pina colada flavor, or Playa, the retro vibe, tons and tons of great flavors, sparkling watermelon lemonade as well. If you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, head on over to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address. They'll tell you the closest place where you can pick one up. Maybe it's a Walmart, a health fitness store, a Publix, Stop and Shop, or your bodega.
Bodega.
And once you know you love Celsius and you want more and you want to get it in bulk, you can over on Amazon with the subscribe and save. Have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want to, completely at your leisure. I'd recommend that variety pack because there's so many fantastic flavors of Celsius. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. We had a comment that goes into what we are about to talk about from Low Country Pirate, who says, saw Joey Bosa is going to be cut. Is he a candidate now for Tampa? The Chargers, I don't know if the Chargers came out with it, but reports have come out that they're going to let go of Joey Bosa. He has a big-time bonus that was about to hit for him. I think it was anywhere from like $12 to $15 million. Wow. So the Chargers don't want to pay that, and he's going to become available. Adam, what are your thoughts about Joey Bosa in the red and pewter?
Yeah, it would have been nice probably back in like 2019, 2020 when he was putting up double-digit sack seasons. But after injuries, kind of, I think, limited him to 14 games between 2022 and 2023, he's lost that Pro Bowl level play. That's the reason why the Chargers last season, they had a great pass rush, but Bosa was a backup. He wasn't a starting player. And I think at this point, he'd be a big name, but an proven commodity, but not the guy that he was. And so I think for that reason, the Bucs, they should probably steer clear from signing Joey Bosa just to be like, oh, we got a 4-time Pro Bowl guy. He's not the same guy.
The injuries are the biggest issue with him. And if he was going to get paid the big money that he's gotten before in his career, the Bucs, there's no way they can even entertain going in that direction. It would set them back in the way that they don't want to. Now, if it was essentially kind of like a prove-it deal in the sense of like how Baker Mayfield got a prove-it deal for 1 year, I think that would totally be fine. I just don't think it should be the number one option that the Bucs have. And Bosa would be another situation of you sign him, maybe you still draft 2 outside linebackers. Like he's not a long-term solution for the Bucs. He's a big name. It's a hot commodity, but it's kind of like the same way that the Bucs got Richard Sherman or Le'Veon Bell back in the day. I think Joey Bosa's best games are behind him. And a lot of it's injury. It's not even his overall skill set. But we've seen at other positions, like with Jamel Dean, that if they're going to move on from him because he's breaking down, why are you going to do that with an edge rusher that's not even on your team that now you want to bring in?
Yeah, and I think at this point, Bosa, he probably offers maybe a little bit more than Anthony Nelson, but for the resume that he has, Bosa's probably going to command 2 to 3 times the salary that Nelson has. So I think for that reason, you look at bigger names. If you can't get a bigger name, trade for somebody. If you can't trade for somebody, draft someone in the first round. I don't think Joey Bosa is the answer.
Social Mako says, Bosa can't stay healthy? Absolutely not. I do agree with you, Adam, though. Like, he's kind of on, at this point of his career, not at their best, but he is kind of on that same plane as Anthony Nelson, where if the Bucs had Nelson and Bosa in front of them, and they were like, hey, we'll play for the same amount of money, I almost think you would go with Bosa just based on, like, the potential he could reach. And if you use him the right way, where maybe he's a third down edge rusher, or you got a little bit more of a rotation going, he's not relied on to play 40 snaps a game or whatever the case may be. I do think there is a role for him in that sense, but also at the same time, like, that's kind of what they wanted to do with Shaq Barrett. And I know we mentioned Shaq a little bit ago, but do you see Shaq coming back like this season?
So when Shaq made his comment at the end of the year that he wanted to play 2 or 3 more years after coming out of retirement, signing with the Bucs, it made me wonder, like, could Shaq Barrett work in the outside linebacker picture next season? And I don't think the Bucs really at this point can guarantee him a spot because they have to see how free agency and the draft goes. But I kind of would like to see Shaq Barrett come back on like a 1 year veteran minimum deal. Like, you know what you have in him. He can kind of be the Will Golston of the room, if you will. Like, as long as he wants to keep coming out to training camp, maybe on Sunday he can rotate in, get 10, 15 snaps. Okay. But I think Shaq Barrett at this point, probably a practice squad guy. But if the team were to move on from Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts, I think just because of his track record, he offers a little bit more.
Shaq would have to have a great training camp. And who knows? Maybe something clicks and he just taps into 2021 version of him. I'm not going to say 2019 or 2020 version of him, but I don't know. If he could find something, I think there's a spot for Shaq, not on the Bucs, but in the league where he is a situational pass rusher. I just don't think it's the right move with Tampa Bay. Now, if Tampa Bay says we'd rather have Shaq instead of Anthony Nelson, sure, I guess that's fine. But Anthony Nelson, you would have for, depending on what type of contract you give him, you'd have Anthony Nelson more for long term than you would Shaq Barrett, which is why I'd kind of advocate for Anthony Nelson more than Shaq. Although Shaq, we can make this real quick. Is Shaq a Bucs Ring of Honor member?
I don't think so. I think with the names that still need to get into the Ring of Honor, at some point, Tom Brady. James Wilder, I think, deserves more mention. Simeon Rice, the fact that he's not in there. I think there's some other names to address before Shaq gets in there. Maybe down the road when they're like, Shaq was instrumental to our 2020 Super Bowl team. Okay, then I can see it.
Yeah, I think he may have to wait a little bit, but I think he's a Ring of Honor member. I think you got to start with Simeon Rice too. I mean, Simeon Rice isn't even in the Bucs Ring of Honor.
Yeah,
you got to start with him and then get to Shaq. But yeah, he's got a special place in the hearts of the Tampa community, no doubt about it. But we'll see what happens with Shaq. Let's go down the list of a couple of other available free agents. We could talk about whether or not we like them. We've got some comments too. We actually have a super chat from Malcolm Harvey. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Malcolm.
For the $4.99 super chat. Says, can't watch the show right now, but thoughts on Azeez Ojulari. Only 24 with good production, playing behind Thibodeau and Burns for the New York Giants.
Azeez Ojulari, he's a good, under the radar kind of name. And you mentioned, Malcolm, his youth there, only being 24. I think he's a guy that he hasn't gotten the fairest shake of things because Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns were starting most of the time. But when he did play, when he did see the field, he was solid. I think he could be that maybe 6-7 sack guy. He's athletic. And I know his brother, he plays in the NFL too. He's kind of the same archetype. He's an athletic linebacker who'd probably fit in Todd Bowles' defense really well. So I think he could be a fit.
Interesting career, especially, and it's a little bit, not exactly the same, but a little bit kind of like what happened with Shaq Barrett, just being behind some of these top edge rushers at the time. Because when he first got to the Giants in 2021, he had 8 sacks in a 17-game season. That's pretty good as a rookie. And they had him at outside linebacker. 5.5 in 2022 in 7 games. And then in 2023 had 2.5 sacks in 11 games, played 11 games in 2024, and recorded 6 sacks. So having that number of 6 in 11 games and, being behind some of these guys, it's not a bad idea by any means. We've seen the thing I worry about with the Bucs is, it's awesome when they get the success that they had with Shaq Barrett and Baker Mayfield, and it turns into the great things that has come from Shaq Barrett and now Baker Mayfield. I like this comment from Brian S. too, who says, Giants never play with the lead either. That's a really good point. My worry, though, is that they've become too accustomed to just, we'll find the diamond in the rough. We'll get the player that nobody else is looking at and talking to, and it'll just work out. That is a rare occurrence. Now, the Bucs have been able to do it time and time again, but I don't want it to become like how they operate in their organization.
Yeah, and I don't think that they necessarily do, like, when they sign that player, but they can't expect every year to find that diamond in the rough because, like, Shaq Barrett, he just exploded out of nowhere. They signed him to a one-year deal. Nobody knew that he was capable of 19 and a half sacks. With Baker
Yeah.
Mayfield, I mean, he spent the training camp competing with Kyle Trask. They didn't expect him to become Pro Bowl Baker. So I think you're more than fine signing those players, but not expecting those grand results because Mayfield and Shaq Barrett, they're probably on the Mount Rushmore of free agent signings by the Bucs.
They absolutely are. Brady, you got to put on there as
Yeah,
well.
Brady's making that too.
Yeah, for sure. Simeon, was Simeon traded or signed in free agency? I
I
can't
think he's
recall. But
signed.
anyway,
Yeah.
okay. So I mean that's another that's probably up there with the Mount Rushmore, no doubt about it. But Baker and Shaq Barrett specifically are a great story of they took a prove it deal. Now in different situations, Baker had to like hold on to his career and take a prove it deal. Shaq Barrett had to prove that he could be the guy, and he absolutely did prove that. But they bet on themselves. They won and then got big time contracts after that. So they got a little bit of money to manage. It's actually a lot of money to manage. And the best place that they could go and manage their money is Immuni Financial.
At Muni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Dude, congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you. And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you?
Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Muni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
That's right. Oh, that's Brian Agrees. Shout out to Brian Agrees. We'll talk to them in a little bit. Immuni Financial, though. Shout out to Immuni Financial. Proudly serving clients across the country since 1980. They can help you with a number of things like advisory services, investment banking, insurance services, annuities, and sales and trading. If you have a kid that wants to go to college, you could set up a college savings account for them as well. The cool thing about Immuni Financial, yes, they have a place in Colorado. Yes, they have a place in Tampa, but they have offices in all of the continental United States. You could be over in Idaho. You can be in Vermont. You can be in Oklahoma, or really anywhere of the places I just mentioned. Maybe you want to go to a Bucs road game this year against one of the opponents out in California as well. They have places for you at Immuni Financial. So give them a call, get a free consultation, and see how Immuni Financial can help you. Want to get to this comment too, also from Brian S., who says, old heads know Hardy Nickerson as a free agent signing helped change the culture on defense before the home run draft picks started arriving. Wanted to make sure we address that point as well, because that is a great point there, Brian S. Hardy Nickerson, along with Tony Dungy, were one of the first guys to kind of help get the Bucs to where they eventually ended up being. So, good.
And I think the defense is in need of another Hardy Nickerson, somebody that is that fire starter on defense. And we mentioned before that if the Bucs were to trade for Max Crosby, he kind of fits that mold. But I think regardless, the defense needs its version of Baker Mayfield, because if Lavonte David were to retire, even if he comes back for another year, they need that other guy that can really form the identity. And I think that's what Hardy Nickerson did back in the day. They became a physical, mentally tough team that was just prepared to battle. And I think right now the defense, they need to find that.
They do. And even Lavante's not like the big time fire
So
starter.
Antoine Winfield Jr. He's not either.
Antoine's not either. Zion is smiling all the time.
Yeah.
He's not either. I don't know if they have that on this defense at the moment. Like, even like Vita Vea is a gargantuan human, and his teammates love him. Like, he's got a very funny side to him. He doesn't show it to the media all the time, but he doesn't need to. But he's not like Ndamukong Suh was kind of that dude, but they don't have that anymore. Same with JPP. Yaya, I think it's somewhere, but he's pretty like chill and casual as well. Some guys can just flip the switch, and I think Yaya is definitely an example of that. Some other free agents. This is according to Pro Football Focus. Hassan Reddick. I have zero interest in Hassan Reddick. The contract thing was a big issue last year during his time with the Jets. I know it worked with the Eagles, but again, that's an example of product of the overall environment. No interest in Hassan Reddick. Malcolm Kuntz of the Las Vegas Raiders, coming off of he had a knee injury.
Yeah, he missed
before the
last
2024 season. Yeah, so another option. But the problem is, and this is where all the defense comes into play as well. Like Dre Greenlaw is another guy that's coming off of an injury. I know it was 2 seasons ago, but he hardly played last year at linebacker. Is that you can't take the injury risk with every single position. They're gonna do it with Chris Godwin if Chris Godwin is back.
But he showed he could come back from injury. You know,
you can
he's been in Tampa Bay.
You can't do that with 3 different positions, though. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned it with Hassan Reddick too. He came back, played 10 games, he had 1 sack. He just missing all that time. He was rusty, and you don't really want that because he doesn't seem like a culture fit. And then Malcolm Kuntz, he is interesting, but I think he's going to get a bigger deal than probably the Bucs want to give him. Just being he's coming off an injury, and he was solid, but I think he's more of a run defense kind of guy. He's not a pure pass rusher, which is probably what the team needs more.
Anyone else that kind of stands out to you that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so you mentioned Joey Bosa kind of being an older guy that's going to be cut. Preston Smith was cut this past week by the Steelers, and he's interesting to me, Matt, because he had a solid 5-year run with the Packers where he recorded 41.5 sacks. So he's at 32 years old. He's like Shaq Barrett, but he's shown in recent years that he could still play. And if you're giving him a 1-year deal for the vet minimum, I don't see how that really hurts. There's no risk really involved there. And so I think he's one name to mention. Kayvon Chason is interesting. So Capo, he does a lot of contract projections. Be sure to check out his work. But he has Chason getting a veteran minimum deal, which is interesting because with the Raiders last season, his last 6 games, he had 4 sacks. And he was a bust with the Jaguars, but he showed that he was solid last season. I don't think that'd be a bad move. Michael Hoyt from the Rams is another guy projected to make about $6 million. In 2023, he had 81 tackles, 6 sacks. I think he's solid. Not the best pass rusher, but a really high floor. So those are some other names to mention. Not the biggest guys out there, but if the Bucs whiff on some of the bigger names, maybe they sign 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm fine with a 1-year rental type of thing, but a rental that's not going to necessarily break the bank unless it's the big names that we've already talked about. Because I know we spent a lot of this show mentioning guys that balled out in one spot and then didn't work out in another. There are also, and we've talked about the prove it guys, there are a lot of other examples of guys that it didn't work out in one spot and then they go to their next place and find their footing and figure it out or have a second run in their career from doing something kind of early on. So that would certainly be interesting to explore if they can't get a Hendrickson or Khalil or whoever they want to go after. DeMarcus Lawrence, to me, a little too old at this point. Same with Matthew Judon.
What about Chase Young?
Didn't work out. Well, Chase Young, I wanted to ask you about because you wrote a story about it, and you seem to be a little more interested in Chase Young.
Yeah, I'm actually quite interested and optimistic about Chase Young because last year we talk about Yaya Diaby's pressures, right? And converting those pressures into sacks. Chase Young had 1 more pressure than Diaby did. He was 14th best in that category. After he tore his ACL, ironically, against the Buccaneers back in 2021, he was on the road to recovery. He signed with the Saints this past year on a 1-year deal, but he played all 17 games. He had 5.5 sacks, but he came into the league. People were projecting him to be that next Myles Garrett, the next superstar. He won Rookie of the Year with the Washington football team back then. But just his resume and his background, it points to he could be so much more. And while the injuries held him back, he's still just 25 years old. And underlying statistics point to maybe he could be that guy again. And I wouldn't classify him in the same tier as Josh Sweat or Khalil Mack. But at $15 million a year, if it's a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal, I could see him fitting in.
I don't know if I'd want to pay him $15 million. That seems a little bit too much. I like Chase Young, in my opinion. I just feel like people are still riding the hype that he had.
He did have a lot.
Like coming out of Ohio State. Like in a weird way, Chase Young and Jadeveon Clowney are guys that like still benefit from what they did in college than what they've done at the NFL level. Now, Clowney was in a tough spot because was he the one that got drafted before Reggie Bush? No,
Clowney. Yeah, he was the first overall pick. I think in 2014. I want to say around there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. No, yeah, I'm getting it completely mixed up. But obviously, there's a lot of hype when you're a first overall pick, and I don't think he lived up to the first. Yeah, sorry.
Dugan, Mario Williams.
Kyle Dugan says Mario Williams. Yeah, I was way off with that. Anyway, there's a lot of hype when you're a first overall pick, especially when it's very much like hit or miss sometimes, and it didn't work out. Jadeveon Clowney was like very solid, but he was never like, oh my God, he's the number one pick for a reason. Chase Young, first round pick. I don't know. I think people are like buying the hype more of than like his on the field production. So 15 million, I think that's a little bit too much for a guy that's kind of like moved around now. 6, 7, 8 million. Yeah, maybe. It's kind of like that prove it deal all over again. There is one other person that, again, it's not like an overall solution, but someone that I'm curious if the Bucs would kind of, kick the tires on a little bit. But first, let's talk about Briar Greaves Insurance, our pals over there. If you've heard us mention Briar Greaves, maybe you're a longtime podcast listener and you remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years, and there simply isn't a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They don't just want to help people. They want to change the overall experience of working in the insurance field and with insurance representatives, because the days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. Briar Greaves Insurance is all about having a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S, or call their office today at 813-876-4166. Another time, that's 813-876-4166, and tell them that Pewter Report sent you. I remember when we did draft coverage on this guy. Started out okay, then it kind of fell off. He's available now. Josh Uche, who was on the Kansas City Chiefs. He began his career with the Patriots, was on the Patriots this season, got traded to Kansas City, but did not dress like for the Super Bowl or for a lot of games, not in the playoff run. He is 26 years old. I'm not sure if he turns 27 before the season, but still on the younger side, not going to reach his 30s for a couple of seasons. It would, again, not be a situation where it's like, hey, the Bucs got Josh Uche. They're good. Like, let's move on to another position. But I wouldn't hate the idea of the Bucs bringing in him, still trying to go after Trey Hendrickson, some of the other big names, and drafting someone as well, and just say, may the best edge rusher win. Now, obviously, if they get Trey Hendrickson or Max Crosby, like they will be the number one outside linebacker, and Yaya Diaby is second. Kyle Dugan with another great point, and also Pewter Report YouTube channel member says, Josh Uche hates money. They could get him for cheap. Good rusher on third down. Yeah, I don't think the Bucs should shy away from looking at a pass rushing specialist or a guy that is only going to do one thing. You don't want to pay someone $30 million that, but for someone much, much cheaper, I don't hate them trying to add something different than what they already have on this defense.
Fully agree. And I like Kyle's point there that he hates money. I mean, he'd probably be like somebody you can get for $3 million. And with the Patriots, even during in 2022, he had an 11.5 sack season. He only played 38% of the defensive snaps that year, which blows my mind. Like getting that production, he hasn't been able to recapture it, but as somebody that could be like opposite Anthony Nelson on some of those hockey shifts that Todd Bowles likes to do on third downs, there is a lot of value in that. And him just being a pure pass rusher, could get after the quarterback. He hasn't maybe had the production that you'd want, but I think he has an overall profile that Bowles could probably try to extract some value out of.
Another thing that's mind-blowing is all the great food and drinks over at Walk-Ons.
What an amazing comeback, Coach.
You're not kidding. I mean, we did lose the game badly, but coming to Walk-Ons afterward, the team got a much-needed win off the field.
Walk-Ons for the win.
Shout out to our friends over at Walk-Ons. Download the Walk-Ons app and you can earn rewards when doing so, like getting free mozzarella logs. When you download it today, you can earn, save, and win with Walk-Ons rewards and get 100 bonus points when you get the Southern Bourbon wings and that Southern Bourbon sauce as well. There are 3 Walk-Ons in the Tampa Bay area, one in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and another close to Raymond James Stadium over in Midtown. So check out Walk-Ons today. Go there tonight for the Team USA versus Canada hockey game for the championship of the Four Nations face-off. The first game was electric. This one should be just as much fun, even better if Team USA ends up winning again and taking home the title. I'm so excited for that game and for that matchup. I'm also excited for our Pewter Insider tomorrow. So this is a good time to give a shout out to our Pewter Platinum members. Thank you to Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, Zach Jarvis, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, and Zach Brannigan. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate that. We look forward to talking with you along with our Pewter Platinum members, our Platinum and Premier members tomorrow for the Pewter Insider. That'll be on at 1:30. We're going to talk about the Bucs needing to go all in 2025. So that is Friday's show. And just a reminder for everybody, there will be no show on Monday because it is a travel day. We are heading to Indianapolis, Indiana for the 2025 NFL Combine. We will have couple of Pewter reporters going there. So because it is a travel day, no Pewter Report podcast on Monday because we're hitting the road, but we're going through the skies as well as we are flying to Indianapolis for the Combine. And so we'll have a Tuesday show later in the afternoon. Time to be determined. We'll let everybody know on our social media. But we're going to talk about the press conference of Jason Light and Todd Bowles, our reaction to it, what we took away from speaking to the people in charge of the Bucs and their personnel. So a lot of great stuff coming up, a lot of combine and draft coverage coming up next week. So in the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We're at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment as well. That'll do it for us on today's show. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you soon for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.